Hello, school transportation nation, and happy holidays. You know, the winter is coming. Maybe it's a little colder, a little chill in the air. Chris Kringle, he's on his way. Jingle bells, all the way, right, Ryan?
Absolutely. Well, what fun it is to ride.
Well, riding on the yellow school bus is definitely what we're going to do today. And this episode is brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, by Thomas Built Buses, a leader in pupil transportation, and by Zonar, a leader in smart fleet management. We'll be talking about the top articles in each edition of the magazine. That's STN Magazine, School Transportation News. We have our editorial guru, Mr. Ryan Gray, who's always on top of the content, the pulse of our industry. So excited to dive into that. We always look back at our Google Analytics and see, hey, what was the most popular? What were people reading? What was the scintillating articles happening at that time? And looking back at 12 months, there's a lot of articles we've written, Ryan. There's just a lot there.
Exactly. Dozens and dozens of articles, and not even looking at the online articles that we did. We have dozens more. I mean, do you think we have, 8 or 10 articles in any given issue? We have, double, triple, quadruple that online every month. So absolutely, it's a labor of love, as I've often said, and always looking for the latest breaking news, nuance. We're always looking at the wires, talking to folks. I know, Tony, you're talking to folks. I'm talking to folks. We always want to hear from you too. If we're not talking to you and you have something you want to share, reach out to us. Let us know what's going on in your area. If there's an issue, a challenge, a win, we want to celebrate those. We want to report those as much, if not more, than all the bad stuff. So definitely reach out and let us know.
We always talk about the negative headlines. Whenever you go to the general news media, it's generally negative stuff. We scour the internet for different stories, and we're always looking for positive stories. So guys, definitely take Ryan up on that. Reach out to us. Ryan, where do they email you?
Ryan, RYAN, at stnonline.com, which of course is the same URL for the magazine.
Yeah, excellent. Well, guys, you can always go to the website, stnonline.com, take a look at all the latest news stories, back catalog of magazines, back catalog of episodes of podcasts. Around the holidays, we might miss you for an episode, but, you can always catch up on all the great content we have. Got, 240 plus episodes for you to enjoy. So definitely dive into that. And before we get to the top headlines, we have a quick message. Passionate about student transportation, Thomas Built Buses designs, builds, and delivers many of the safest vehicles on the road. Safety is the foundation of everything they do, and this commitment ensures that Thomas Built is a place where it is safe to build a bus as it is to ride one. From design innovation and driver comfort to durability and ease of maintenance, they build their buses as if their own children were riding on them, because they are, and because every mile matters. To learn more about what drives them, visit thomasbuiltbuses.com. That's thomasbuiltbuses.com. All right, we're back, Ryan. So let's break it down. January 2024, that's like about a year ago. I know we're working on the 2025 buyer's guide and 2025 January issue right now. That's being worked on by the team, headed to the press. Hopefully it's going to be in your inbox January 1st, and you can take a look at all the data. But, rolling back 12 months, what were the top stories we were seeing there?
Well, the top story for January was actually a thought leader. So that is our branded column, essentially, from folks in the industry, sometimes experts outside of the industry who have something really important to say about school transportation. And the January thought leader was contributed by Belinda Govich, who at the time was the assistant director of transportation at Shenandoah Central School District in upstate New York. She is now the director of transportation. Her boss, Al Karam, retired in June at the end of school. So then she took the reins. But she was the assistant at the time, assistant director, and really overseeing a lot of the special needs operations there. So she wrote about nurturing positive student behavior, effective management strategies. And the fact that this was the most read article in the January issue really proves to us something that we already know. And coming out of TSD conference a few weeks ago, so much information is needed on behavior. That's what we've heard time and time again from our TSD attendees. And we delivered that, I think, in Frisco back in last month in November. We had so many behavior experts there talking about positive behavior, nurturing these students, communicating with them, communicating with the parents. And so Belinda actually did a great job of taking the readers through what her district does in managing those strategies, setting those clear expectations and rules, providing that positive reinforcement. So again, PBIS is what a lot of you know, the positive behavior intervention and supports. We had a class on that at TSD, and we do basically every year. So it's taking a lot of the strategies that have worked in the classroom and applying them to the school bus, because where the students learn and where they're conditioned to learn is that classroom. And to really make school bus an extension of the classroom, you need to be teaching the same way in the school bus, and vice versa. You need to get the classroom to buy in as well. Also talked about managing negative student behavior. There's a lot of that, obviously, and that can be not just necessarily with students with special needs, but that can be any students. Communication and partnership, that can be really general. Training and support, and education and awareness. So really jumped out to me that again, what we're hearing from the folks really rings true, that dealing with that behavior on board is a very big issue and something that our readers and our attendees desperately need training on.
Ryan, I know when we look deep at the stories that we're developing, we're really leaning into the experts, right? STN, we report the news. And I mean, I think we're compiling and talking to so many people and getting so many different opinions and hearing the feedback from the audience. But it always comes back to people like to hear from their peer group. People like to hear what others are doing that are transformational in their school transportation operations. And this is resoundingly true throughout the editorial that we write in the year. So it's great to see someone who's moved up the ranks, but that's a typical story in school transportation, right? Started as assistant director, maybe even, I don't know her path earlier, but maybe was at the district in an earlier role and has moved up and now is director. And Al Karam was obviously a good friend and still is of STN. And we miss him greatly. I still see him commenting here or there on social media. So it's great to get great reaction like this. And, I think these are also sessions at the conferences that we try to put together too, schedules permitting. So we always try to bring forward these conversations and really drive the industry forward with this dialogue. So it's a great one, Ryan. Great choice.
And I think it's also important to note that, when we're looking at articles, when I'm looking at sessions for the conferences, it is that balance that I'm always striving to find. Certainly when you mention the experts out there, and there's so many experts, and there's experts on the national stage, international stage, in their field of study. Certainly a lot of experts out there in school bus operations. And one thing that I know and we know at STN is there's no one size fits all. And certainly, what works for Belinda and what works for Shenandoah Central School District in New York might not work for the district next door, or certainly the district in another state. And because we have all these 50 states that have essentially 50 different requirements, yes, there are a lot of similarities out there, but a lot of differences as well. And what's good for the goose isn't necessarily good for the gander, but these are strategies. These are ideas, thought-provoking topics to discuss and say, hey, what might work for us that this article talks about, or what this person says. Maybe this we can't do this because of X, but we could try Y. So it's always trying to move the needle, push the envelope a little bit as well, get people to really look at their operations and dissect what they are doing and see how can we do this better and safer.
Yeah, I agree, Ryan. Great stuff. So let's move on to February. What did we see there?
Yeah, so February was the article by our Taylor Ekbatani, senior editor, investing in the people, another hot topic. So investing in people, we've seen that a lot over the last several years, especially coming out of COVID-19, Tony, with the worsening, I guess, labor shortage. I won't even call it a school bus driver shortage, just in terms of across the board, trying to hire and retain people. It's really coming down to culture. That's what we hear over and over again. Certainly pay is a very big driver of that as well. But investing in the people, and not just in terms of pay, but in terms of what you're providing them for training. What do they need to get their jobs done? So Taylor did a great job of, talking about that, technology. What technology are you bringing to your employees? What technology are you offering on their school buses to help them do their jobs safer and easier and better? Work smarter, not harder. That type of approach. So there's a lot to be said about how you train and really listening to your drivers and finding out what they need, talking to your mechanics, what do they need in the garage to help them do their jobs better. So a lot of diving into that and seeing how can you invest in people to get more out of them, but also help make them happier at what they're doing, so that ultimately the kids that they're servicing, they win.
Yeah, and looking back at the article in the February issue, there's a lot of great data points. It looks like we had surveyed our audience and there's a range of responses, but great data points in there. A lot about safety, school bus stop safety, loading and unloading zone practices. Really does come back to that, especially with all the stuff happening with loading and unloading zone fatalities report that came out last month. And so I think that there's a lot here for you guys to reconnect with. So I invite you to go check out the February issue and reread that story on investing in the people. Definitely a good read, Ryan. And our own Taylor Ekbatani, which we're lovely to have her back in January. I know she's been out on maternity leave, so happy to have her back in the new year.
That's right. And absolutely. And, and when you're talking about that training, it's not only for the school district employees. A lot of folks are using contractors, and where, maybe about 2/3 of the country traditionally has been operating school buses in-house. We're seeing a lot of other services now being contracted out, alternative transportation for one. And, when you're doing that training, make sure that those training requirements that are settled with your team within the district, make sure that those are also making their way into each and every contract you have, no matter how many contracts you have. So yeah, just some really good insights there. In terms of that training, yes, a lot on the loading and unloading zone, which, like you mentioned, Tony, always a hot topic, as we recently saw with the latest unveiling of the National School Bus Unloading and Loading Survey. But yeah, some great stuff over there. So kudos to Taylor.
So the March issue, I was looking at the headline that producer Claudia sent us, and the top story was breaking down the RFP process, which is always a daunting process, right? To get equipment, buses, technology. If you spend over a certain threshold, you have to go to RFP. So not surprised. This is a lot more of a technical article. So what's your take on the request for procurement? It's still hot as ever?
Oh, I think it has and will be, it will continue to be. often when I talk to folks on both the vendor side and the school district or the operator side, I often hear that the RFP or RFI, so request for proposal, obviously, or RFI, request for information, the bid, whatever you call it, it's vital that you get your ducks lined up in a row. You do your research. You talk to people. You test products. You get demos if you can. That is just vital. That because when you miss something in the RFP process, that can set multiple people up for failure. It can certainly set up whoever wins the bid for failure. It certainly can set up the school district for failure as well. So it really needs to be a collaborative process. And it was actually the article was born out of an idea for a panel session that we had at STN Expo West in July. So Alexandra Robinson, one of our editorial advisors, she's a TSD tenured faculty member for me, consultant, expert witness, just overall, a great person to know in the school transportation world, literally the world, not just in the U.S., worldwide. She said that she wanted to approach the possibility of having this panel where she had vendors up there, she had school districts up there, and that they really talked through how to really ensure that you can create a winning RFP. And that's where, Ruth Ashmore, she took that idea and she ran with it, and she did a great story on this. And Alex actually then wrote a sidebar in this feature in March, and then she wrote a blog for the subsequent months leading up to the July panel. And it was a very well attended panel, which again proved to us that this is something that folks need to get more information on. The folks are starved for how can we do this better? How can we ensure that our next RFP or when we go out to bid next, that we are successful, we get what we want. And that means that we need to communicate what we need, and also don't communicate what you don't need. I think too many RFPs are laden with unnecessary language, unnecessary requirements in there that really drag things down, and it really puts the vendors in a bind. So that was a really great session because Alex did a great job of bringing all the perspectives to the table. So I think a lot of folks were illuminated by that one, as well as the article. So it really set the stage.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And like you said, there's a sidebar in that RFP article from Alex, which is great read as well. So kind of a 2-for-1. Thanks to Ruth Ashmore for writing that article for us, our own Ruth. So really great story there to highlight. So looking at April, the story there was lessons learned. So what lessons are being learned, Ryan? What have people jumped out? Electric school buses, it looks like this one's taking a deep dive on.
Electric school buses. Yeah, lots of lessons to be learned with the ESBs. So Carrie Liderson, one of our contributing writers, she has a lot of experience writing on clean energy. So she often you'll see her name attached to a lot of our clean school bus, electric school bus, propane, what have you, articles. So she spoke to several school districts and looking at especially some rural ones, kind of getting that conversation started, because we've heard so much from some of these very large school districts. Urban school districts have a lot more funding, of course, when you have clean school bus program money to buoy that. It really sets them up for some big wins there. And we know that electric school buses don't work everywhere. There's certain places like in bigger cities where with that stop and go traffic, electric school buses work a lot better. Not necessarily out in the rural counties. Well, Carrie did track down several school districts, such as Chickasaw County School District in Mississippi. She talked to a couple school districts in Louisiana that are just heading out on the electric navigation there in their parishes and their districts, and talked to them about some of the lessons that they are learning or have learned as they're rolling out these electric school buses. And certainly, also brought in the perspective of a large school district like Baltimore City Public Schools. And they have the collaboration with Highland Electric, which has really helped them. And Highland Electric has really been expanding its footprint nationwide in providing that electrification as a service or fleet as a service to folks, not needing some of the EPA money. Though certainly that EPA money, Highland is one of the big winners every round that we've seen, just along with a lot of the other OEMs. But just really talking to folks about the importance of getting out in front of electrification, and something that we've been hearing over and over again. Get in touch with your utility, get to know them. Range remains an issue. But these charging issues are being figured out. They are challenging, but there is help to be found, and utilities are providing that. Vendors, such as some of these charging companies that like Highland Electric fleets that are these electrification as a service, helping them, how do you secure the cheapest electricity rate? How do you set up for automatic charging for overnight? How are you planning your site? Do you know if you have enough power at your depot? What are your charger considerations, route analysis, training of staff, mechanics, drivers? So really did a good job of talking to some of the early clean school bus award winners to find out kind of where are they on their journey, and what are those lessons that they've been learning. And we're going to continue to hear these lessons learned, because we're still at the infancy of this, Tony. There's 5,000 and change or so school buses out there right now, at least that have been dedicated to school districts or school bus companies. So we're going to be hearing a whole heck of a lot more lessons learned as we go forward.
So we have our May issue, which we focus a lot on safety and in case of an emergency. So again, emergency preparedness. Let's talk a little bit more about that. That seems to be a big thing. Again, more safety, right?
Absolutely. So Associate Editor Ruth Ashmore again makes a return appearance after her March article. So she talked a lot about incident command systems. So this was a special report, and she spoke with Brett Brooks, a security expert who we often cite in the magazine and we have at our conferences. He was just out at TSD conference and did a great session out there with Julie Gillick on emergency planning and security and crisis planning for students with disabilities. But, so this article, obviously emergency preparedness is always top of mind for student transporters. So Brett, he really took readers through some of the different courses that provide a wide variety of training in terms of incident command systems. But perhaps not all that is needed by student transporters, and probably not. And, certainly school districts that are going after federal funding for ICS, there's going to be certain requirements or certain courses that their folks are going to have to take. But really, it's looking at what is necessary, and also operating drills, doing exercises with your local first responders. And we've worked with Brett on those kind of exercises at our STN Expo West. Also, she spoke with Paul Hassenmeyer, who is the fire chief and director of public safety for Hernando County in Florida. He was actually out at STN Expo West with us this summer as well. He has been previously and has written articles for us. And ICS from a fire standpoint is different from the ICS that the police are going to have. So Brett comes from a law enforcement background. Paul has the fire background. And then the ICS that a school bus driver will be completely different. Because really, in the end of the day, the most important thing for the school bus driver is that they evacuate the students and keep them safe until help arrives. That is, the ultimate thing that they need to do. And then they can, of course, go from there. But really, looking at that, and she spoke with the school district, Cherry Creek School District in Colorado, about how they handle safety and security and emergency preparedness, how they do some training. So again, when it comes to emergency preparedness, working with law enforcement, working with first responders, always something big on that training spectrum that student transporters will always sit up and take notice of.
Excellent, Ryan. Well, that's been a great recap so far. And guys, remember stnonline.com. You go to our magazine section, just click on the tab. You can catch all these great stories, reconnect with them, and get a lot out of it. All right. Well, we're going to continue in just a second after a quick message. Hey, have you guys heard the great news? Zonar and GPS Track It have joined forces. This new alignment will bring even greater strength to the industry-leading position of Zonar in the commercial fleet telematics markets they serve. Similar to Zonar, for more than 2 decades, GPS Track It has been a pioneering force in cloud-based IoT fleet solutions and GPS fleet tracking. You guys can learn more at zonarsystems.com. Again, you can learn more at zonarsystems.com. So Ryan, we're talking June issue. Anyone can achieve a greener fleet was our top story. You want to break that down for the audience a little bit?
Yeah, so Taylor Ekpatani returns to the stage here with her article, and she did a feature and really expanded more into looking at the infrastructure needed for electric school buses, some strategies employed by districts, both small and large. So like what we saw, kind of, taking the handoff from Kerry several months earlier in the year, and talking to some different school districts, talking with Three Rivers School District in Michigan, very small, very rural. We know Transportation Director Kenny Jean Schrader. She's a good friend of ours, an award winner out there, Green Bus Fleet Award winner for Three Rivers and their adoption of electric. And I think they only have about 3 electric so far, but they only have 10 buses in their whole fleet, I believe. But they're more on the way. But then talking to the very large Los Angeles Unified School District here in Southern California, and getting some strategies of what do you need to do to really, again, get out in front of zero emissions or electric school buses. How do you set yourself up for a win? And like LA Unified told us, plan early, work with your utility, develop guidelines and specifications, hire an EV consultant. Seeing a lot more of that from school districts, or even bringing one on staff in some cases, developing a staging and transition plan, consulting with EV charging companies, identifying lead times. That's certainly important because we're hearing that with not only the vehicles, because we've seen those delays, the supply chain has been getting better, but in terms of getting the power. I mean, we're hearing some real horror stories of utilities not being able to service school districts for 12 or 18 months. And how does that jive with if you're going to be getting an EPA award, for example? Developing a strategy that works best for your project. Is it a design build? Is it turnkey, or is it a design bid build type scenario? And challenges will happen. For a student, Kevin Matthews, he's the head of electrification for a student. He discussed knowing the sizes of transformers that you need at the district to distribute the adequate amount of power to your charging stations. Taylor talked with Tony Harris at Monongalia County Schools in West Virginia, and he advised planning well ahead and contacting utility ASAP to figure out transformer needs. And he even advised perhaps having a larger transformer so you can handle more power. Because when you're really talking about scaling, that's where we're at, I think, right now. A lot of the conversation has turned to that, Tony, in terms of electrification. For a lot of folks, it's scaling. How do you scale this? The first few years, especially, or a couple years of Clean School Bus program was, let's just get your feet wet. Let's get you some money. Let's get you a school bus or 3 to tinker with. But now that we're seeing the awards looking at 25 to 50 buses, they're really looking to try to move the needle. So if that's going to happen, folks really need to know how to scale. And that also plays into investing in the right partners, selecting someone that you know will be around a long time, not a fly by night. We've seen a lot of companies enter this space on the electric side. And even with some current headlines, some folks that have been around a while and some of the first at the table with electric buses are having some challenges, some problems. So it's really trying to forecast correctly and really sit down and get to know who you are working with.
Excellent. All right. Well, looking at the July issue, trends in what your school bus drivers' salaries are and what are your solutions. So I know looking at this story, it gave a nice map, a good infographic of wages broken down in regions: Pacific, Rocky Mountains, Midwest, Northeast, Southeast, and Southwest. And there's definitely some differences in pay, Ryan, across the United States, with the Northeast leading the way as the highest wage. And the Rocky Mountains looks like, let's see, is that the lowest? No, Southwest was the lowest. So definitely interesting numbers here as it breaks down. Now, this is all based on survey responses, but the numbers of respondents is not a huge amount. So we'd love for you guys to respond more on these types of surveys, just because they help give us a more of a weighted average of respondents. But really interesting to see the wages. Everybody likes comparing wages, Ryan.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So 209 school districts in the contiguous 48 states, because we love our friends up in Alaska and Hawaii, but there are some issues up there just in terms of being, not landlocked. But we wanted to, and we didn't get the numbers either that we needed to really validate. But we did get 209 school districts in the contiguous 48 to respond, and certainly, yeah, like you noted, Tony, the Southwest had the lowest range. But if you look nationwide, if you're looking at the starting wages of school bus drivers, really, if you go nationwide, there's only about a $4 difference. Maybe $4 and we'll say 40 cents. So the Southeast, for example, has the lowest average starting wage at $20.29 per hour. The Northeast has the starting wage of $24.70, and everywhere else is somewhere in between. $22.30 out in the Pacific, so California, Oregon, Washington, $20.68 in the Southwest, which is Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, $21.72 in the Rocky Mountains. So we included Nevada in that, along with Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana. And the Midwest was $21.89. So that's all those Midwest states from Ohio, and Michigan and Indiana over to North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska and Kansas and everything in between. And then we also looked at the maximum wages. So for more senior drivers, again, maximum starting wages. And again, a little bit more variance, but a low of $25.45 an hour in the Southwest, to as high as $34.62 in the Northeast. So a little bit more variance, but the Southeast was $30.78, $29.62 in the Midwest, $27.29 in the Rocky Mountains, and $30 even out west. So certainly folks are always looking to see where they stand. Are they paying what they need to be paying? And I hear that a lot on the macro level, even talking to several transportation directors out at TSD last month. One of them, in fact, told me, she was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just found out the district next door, they just raised their minimum wage for their drivers. So I'm going to have to go to my board now because we were already low. compared to them, and they just really bumped it up. So now I'm going to have to go to the board now and talk, because we're going to lose a bunch of drivers.
Yeah,
So
keeping up with your neighbor, right? That's
exactly.
we see that all the time, poaching people because of wages, and we see that dialogue going regularly. Is how do we reclassify our drivers to get them more money, because it's really difficult to just, you can't arbitrarily, like in a private company, like and say, hey Ryan, you get a raise, right? Like
Yes,
you
sweet.
can't do that in school transportation, right? You can do bonuses for attendance, but you have to do for all, right? It's kind of a much more broad years of service. People get bonuses for attendance. So you see those tactics being used, but you can only do so much. And I think people really need a living wage. And, it's already low as it is. And that's very difficult for somebody to maintain. So not a surprise. Commercial drivers continue to be in high demand. And the wage war seems to be continuing when you're fighting against Amazon and all these other private businesses that can afford to just lay out much bigger dollars. So you got to make it more of a mission intensive kind of operation, because you're moving kids, right? They're difficult to move. There's behavior issues. They're not boxes. They don't talk back, right? So those are always the challenge I think the industry is going to be faced with in a e-commerce world, with all the deliveries out there and all the other opportunities.
Absolutely. So Taylor Ekbatani did a great job, and she had an accompanying article where she spoke with several districts in the different regions and learned from them what their wages are and their thought process behind that. So a great read.
Yeah, and also just to make sure and remind everybody, since it's summertime, we're in the summer issues. We have STN Expo. Normally, STN Expo East was in June, but it's been moved to March. So it's March 20th through the 25th in Charlotte, North Carolina. So you guys are going to want to lock in our early bird rate to save $100 on your registration. Go book a room at the Embassy Suites in Concord, Charlotte. We'd love to have you. We got a sold out trade show, a jam-packed schedule. We have our bus technology summit, our green bus summit. We've got a great event out at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, technology demonstrations, ride and drives. We're moving things around. We have our transportation director summit out at Top Golf as well. They're in Charlotte. We're doing a fun thing with Roush, Cleantech, and Bluebird at the Roush Racing Museum there in Charlotte. So there's a lot happening, lots of fun things, content, education. Make sure and sign up at stnexpo.com/east. And we also have our STN Expo West conference, which I'll give you more details on just a little bit. So as we kind of continue down the road, Ryan, let's take a look at the August issue. Again, what's driving electric school buses? Is it money? Is it funding?
Well, yes, but we're actually looking at what literally is driving electric school buses. So Mark Rowe, one of our contributing writers, wrote a really informative piece. I learned a lot with this one, Tony, just in editing it, looking at e-axles, motors mounted to chassis or drive shafts, batteries, that stuff that's actually empowering these electric school buses on the road. So he took a look at what's on the market currently and why, and what's being planned. There are a lot of similarities out there when comparing manufacturers, but also some stark differences. So he also looked at the evolution of the lithium-ion battery, from the nickel, cobalt, manganese that we've seen basically across the board, to now the movement toward, and several manufacturers are already using them now, lithium iron phosphate. So that virtually eliminates the thermal runaway that's been a big concern from the NCM nickel, cobalt, manganese battery because of the lower energy density. Ride, which is BYD's school bus brand, has been using its LFP blade technology. Green Power has been using lithium iron phosphate. And at STN Expo West in July, Microbird announced it's using LFP in its new G5E Type A. So Mark talked with Accelera by Cummins, obviously, one of the main battery providers going forward in terms of commercial vehicles, especially for the school bus market. They power several or at least a couple school bus manufacturers. They have developed 2 LFP battery programs while they're continuing to offer NMC. So a really interesting article that really breaks down where we stand, and again, looking at the axles, and there's been the Blue Horizon by Meritor that's been bandied about for a while, and what's coming with that. So talked with a lot of OEMs. It was a really good article if you're looking to get into electric school buses, or especially if you already have them and you're trying to figure out what's next. Great read.
Excellent. I've got a quick message. Hey guys, what do software, hardware, and safety have in common? One word: TransFinder. At the STN Expo in Reno, TransFinder won 3 Innovation Choice Awards, voted on by STN Expo attendees for best software, best hardware, best safety technology. TransFinder's Route Finder plus routing solution and apps, Stop Finder and Wayfinder, are well known in the industry. Not everyone realizes TransFinder provides hardware like card readers, tablets, and mounts. And as for safety, Patrol Finder for schools is TransFinder's latest solution designed to make buses and campuses safer. TransFinder's president and CEO, Antonio Civitella, said the recognition means so much because it's voted on by STN Expo attendees. Civitella said, "We know a lot is riding on TransFinder because a lot is riding on those yellow buses that travel through our communities. TransFinder must continue to innovate as more is being expected of transportation departments from district leadership as well as parents." Learn more at transfinder.com. That's transfinder.com. All right, Ryan, diving into, let's see, where are we at now? Was that September? September issue. We've got accounted for. So what is accounted for, Tom? We were talking about accounting for money or accounting for students?
Accounted for ? So our contributing writer, Carol Brzezowski, she was looking at technology used for student detection at school bus stops. So certainly here we are. We're back to that school bus loading and unloading topic that is so top of mind for student transporters everywhere. A lot of technology, Tony, has been developed over the last several years, and that is actually starting to be used out there in the field to better help school bus drivers with their jobs. And I'd mentioned that earlier with the Investing in People article. In terms of training, that will always take precedence, but how can technology assist? And so what Carol did is she looked at several articles and talked with some safety consultants about the issue. Why kids are getting hurt and killed in school bus loading and unloading zones. And yes, some of it has to do with illegal passers. But as we often remind folks, there have been more student fatalities at the hands of the school bus that they are riding on or are trying to ride on than by illegal passers. And you look back over the 54 years of the National School Bus Loading and Unloading Survey. So when we're really looking at student detection, and there's a lot of training, again, that goes into providing that safe stop for students. And there's a lot of training that the students need to be trained on. They need to be instructed on how to conduct themselves at school bus stops, how early to arrive. But as we've seen with the school bus driver shortage, quote unquote, and a lot of other things, we have a lot more school buses that are running late. We're in inclement weather right now. We're heading into the winter. I know there's been some snowstorms back east already. If you watch your NFL football games, they've been prominently displayed on TV for all. A very cold weather, snow. Kids don't want to be standing out at the school bus stop 15 minutes before the bus arrives, or 10 minutes, or whatever the recommendation is. Parents are going to want to keep their kids warm. And then when they know the bus is coming up, and certainly we have apps now that tell the parent when the bus is arriving. But when the bus has arrived, there is quite a bit of technology out there: 360 cameras, radar, that detects these students, video that shows where the students are. It has the AI enhanced element to it as well. AI enabled software to identify pedestrian hazards. Just a lot of stuff out there, a lot of products, from various manufacturers, various vendors. So it's a really great read. And in terms of that too, she also looked at lighting the way for the school bus, so making the school bus more visible as well. So that kind of goes part and parcel with the whole conversation, that we've seen some really great gains in terms of making a highly visible vehicle like the school bus. You would think, how more visible can you make it? Well, I've seen some of this technology in practice, and it really does make a difference. So did a great job, really extensive article that Carol wrote, kind of looking at it here. I think it's, over a dozen pages long. So, or about a dozen pages long. So, great article. I would definitely invest some time in reading that one.
Yeah, I agree, Ryan. Also, we have the home stretch. We're almost to the finish, guys. We have the October edition of the magazine. It is changing, correcting bell times can have a positive effect on routing. Bell time changes, always a big thing. You're forced to adjust to save money, to adjust your fleet size to right size because you only have a certain amount of drivers. This one's always a hot topic, Ryan, and October was not that long ago. So I feel like this is as hot a topic as it's ever going to be.
Yeah, well, October, the reason we had this in October is that gives people a month or two to kind of decompress after the school startup, and that's of course when we see a lot of new bell times thrown out at student transportation. When student transportation can actually direct those bell times, that's better. But oftentimes that's not the case. That's a decision being made in the superintendent's office or maybe by the school principals, and even then the school principals want their own bell times. So bell times can be extremely challenging. And I think that, when done correctly, yes, bell times can have a positive effect on routing, and vice versa as well. So Mark Rowe, our contributing writer, back on the stage with his October article, where he looks at lessons learned from school startup and something that has bitten some school districts in the what over the last couple of years, and very publicly, and in the media has jumped all over it, has been with some of these bell times not allowing for adequate time between runs. So that's where the routing really comes into play, or can really bite you in the what. So it's just talking to school districts about lessons they've learned in implementing bell times and using routing and using their software. And things can get even more challenging when you add in students with disabilities. So he talks about that as well. That is already a very complicated form of student transportation. And then when you're talking about those ride times, or you're talking about time between runs, that can get really complicated. So great job by Mark.
Well, Ryan, we've got our last issue, Going Big, featuring Transportation Director of the Year, Craig Beaver, our top article in the November issue. Everybody wants to know who the Transportation Director of the Year is. And Craig was announced up there in Beaverton, Oregon, right? Like you guys said, it was preordained. The name Craig Beaver, Beaverton, who could have thunk it?
It was kismet, as he described to me. So yeah, great article. Taylor Ekbatani again. She managed to turn out just a whopper of a story. Did a great job right before she had her baby in October, little baby Zach, who we're the team here at STN is looking forward to meeting in the new year. But boy, she really got a lot done there at the very end. The clock was on. But she turned in a great story on Craig. We really got to know him and know more about his story, which was really interesting. A San Diego kid, born and bred, went to college down there, played college football. And he actually, his first job in student transportation, he actually worked for a trucking firm for many years, and then was at Grossmont Union High School District down in the San Diego area for about a dozen years. And he and his wife, they decided he was going to retire. He had came to that time, and they had decided that they wanted to move up to the Pacific Northwest. And they landed in Beaverton, and the whole family was like, "Oh my gosh, this is destiny." And destiny it has been. He's really taken off since his time in Beaverton. Really become a champion of change up there, and that it can be seen through the acceptance of electrification up there. He actually won an award earlier this year at the Advanced Clean Transportation Expo, the ACT Expo, that was held out in Las Vegas. And STN is a media sponsor of that each and every year. So we widely report on that, and we wrote about Craig and really Beaverton's win. Craig was there to accept the award, but that's where we got to sit down and get to know more about him. And we selected him for that, and as well as other things. He's doing so much more than simply electrification. Just the way that he's leading that operation up there. So it's a great story. Taylor talks with several of his staff members, and they kind of provide the juxtaposition between what it was before and what it has become under Craig's leadership. So he's done an outstanding job up there, and it was great to see him out at TSD conference. He brought his lovely wife with him and received the award officially on stage. I know you were there, Tony, and handed that to him. So it was great to see Craig. And if you want to learn more about him and all the data that he has too, when it comes to electric school buses, he's an open book, and he's an open book about everything.
Propane too, right? He's got a lot on propane, all of it.
He uses a lot of propane. He wants everything. It reminds me a lot of Tim Shannon, the former director of transportation at Twin Rivers Unified down in the Sacramento, California area. He's retired now, but Tim was one of the first early adopters of the new electric school bus, the from factory, from the ground up school bus, if you will, that we've seen really since 2017, late 2016, where he just wanted to have renewable fuels, renewable diesel. Craig has that as well. Tim wanted propane. Craig has that. I think the only thing Craig doesn't have is CNG up there. But he also wants, in terms of electric, he wants it from every manufacturer he can get a hand on. He wants to try it. He wants to get them in there and see what works best. And then he wants to share the information. He's got some great data that breaks down what the cost per mile of his electric school bus is compared to his diesel school bus, compared to his propane school bus. And he, amortizes it to such degree that he adds in vehicle insurance. It's crazy. And he really is an open book. So read that article. There's a link to some data on his website. And certainly he is open and eager to discuss with anyone who is interested. So great article. Kudos to Taylor again, and congratulations to Craig.
Wonderful. Well, Ryan, this was a great recap episode. I want to thank you for a great year of podcasts. Lots of hard work, great articles. We are looking forward to an outstanding 2025. Lot to be thankful for this year. And we appreciate our sponsors, TransFinder, Thomas Built Buses, and Zonar. Guys, you can visit stnonline.com for all the latest news, analysis, magazines. You can go check it out, read them for yourselves, refamiliarize yourself with some of these top articles by month, broken down by Ryan and I. Guys, you can also go STN Expo. We have STN Expo East, March 20th through the 25th in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we also have STN Expo West in Reno, Nevada. That's July 11th through the 16th. We can't wait to see you this summer or this fall. You never know where you're going to find us. Make sure you lock in the early bird and super early bird rates. Save some cash for your district or operation. Don't forget, you can listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Listen to all the episodes. They're cataloged for you guys. We wish you a happy holidays, nation. We'll see you next year.